say, Pastor Troy, my iPad's not working, or my phone's not working, or my TV's not working. Just a couple years ago, I helped someone hook up a VCR. You know what that is? You don't. They call for help. My phone isn't working properly. And first thing, I come in this morning, I put on my computer wasn't working. What's the first thing I do? Reset it. You just restart it. And generally, so stop calling. This is just a general rule. If something you have that's electronic and it's not working, before you call anyone, before you call your 5-year-old granddaughter or grandson, just restart it. You have to do like this reset. I don't know what it is about that, but you do this reset and it kind of starts working again. So I came in, my computer was really slow, it was really frustrating. And here's a bit of advice. If you're single and you are looking to get married and you meet someone that you want to marry, you need to put them in front of a slow computer or slow internet. Then you will find out what they're really like. Because things come unglued for me when the internet is slow or my computer's slow. So I just restarted the computer and everything was fine. Because sometimes we need to do a reset. People call for help and I'll say, just push these buttons, Christine, and reset. We'll be at home and just yesterday Noah was like, the internet's not working and I can't play Fortnite for 10 hours. And so I just look over and he's got all the plugs in his hand. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm resetting the internet. Because he knows that sometimes you have to do a reset. Before Noah learned how to reset the internet, I would reset the internet. And if you know anything about having children in this day and age, it's like a national emergency when you have to reset the internet. What? There's no Wi-Fi? For 4 minutes? It's like I have to go to every room in the house. Okay, everyone. I'm about to reset the internet. We're going to be in the 80s for about 4 minutes. So everyone calm down. Meet the people around you. They're nice. Sometimes when life gets stressful or life is hard, you ever feel like life just needed a reset? People do that in all different ways. Some people just say, you know what, I had to go for a run because I had to reset, or I had to go out in nature. There's something about being in nature, going for a walk in the woods, that just is kind of this reset. My wife, it's vacation. And it's not just the vacation. If you ask Penny after church, what are you guys doing on your next 5 vacations? She knows. She doesn't just know that we're going away in May. She's like, we're going away in May, and then in the fall we're going here. And she'll just keep going. And 2022, I have my eye on, because that's just the way that she resets. Some people go through a reset by just unplugging from social media. And they'll say, you know what, I'm not going to go on social media for 2 or 3 days because I just need to reset. And there's always different ways that we reset. Some people do it taking a spiritual retreat like we heard from Denis a few weeks ago. Some people do it by fasting or doing a cleanse, and they kind of just reset. And it's that same idea that you unplug and you let things kind of get back to normal, and then you plug them back in. And this happens in different ways because our wires kind of get crossed, or the signals get crossed, and we lose focus. I mean, I don't understand all the technical terms of why it happens to a computer, but I just know that if you restart a computer, it usually will fix most of your problems. If you can't print, restart. If you can't connect to the internet, restart. It'll kind of fix things. And sometimes we kind of just need a reset in our own personal life. The wires get crossed, or we lose focus. How many have ever lost focus on what's really important? It happens to us all. And we need to reset. Have you ever been driving somewhere and got lost? that happens to me like sometimes. But the first thing I need to do is I usually, you're going to laugh at me, but I need to stop, pull over, and I need to find out where I am. Sometimes I don't even know where I am. I'm like, how did I get here? And so I got to find out where I am. And it's kind of just resetting my compass so I can figure out where I need to go. I get lost sometimes going places that I've gone 30 times. And I don't know why it is. It's just, I just kind of zone out. My wife's like, it's because you have ADD, I'm sure of it. And it could be, but it's just, I lose my focus and I find myself not knowing where I am. The wires get crossed, the signals get crossed. Life can be like that sometimes, where you need to do a reset, a refocus. And I think that it happens to all of us. Have you ever been in a relationship, whether it's a marriage or a relationship with your kids or a boyfriend and girlfriend, and you just know things have just gotten off track? And you're like, I need to refocus. I need to reset. We lose focus on what is important. We forget who is really in charge. When I need to reset, it's because I have forgotten who's really in charge. And I don't mean Penny. I mean God. So for me, that's what a reset is to me. That I just slowly over time just lose focus. We forget who's in charge. We lose focus on really what the purpose of life is as a Christian. Pastor Kevin just last week, he said, our guest speaker, said, I can solve 95% of what you need to do with your life. And your life is about being a disciple and making a disciple. Making disciples. But we lose track. Our priorities get out of whack. Have you ever had that happen? Where things that aren't so important all of a sudden are the most important? And then we wonder why everybody in our life is frustrated? We've all been there, and it calls for a reset. So what I'm going to say next is this. I really would like, I'm glad to see you all here today. And today, I mean, it's too late for you to leave now, but today and the next 2 weeks are going to be challenging for us. And it's going to be challenging because sometimes a reset is hard. And sometimes a reset, if the first just unplug doesn't work, sometimes you've got to wipe everything clean and you've got to start all over. And so over the next few minutes, I just want to say this. So today, next week, and the next week, I'd really appreciate it if everybody in this room would make every effort to be here. And if you see someone who wasn't here today or think of somebody, message them and really encourage them to be here. Because these are really 3 really important weeks. What I'm going to say next, I don't want you to look at me and say, oh, I have pity for Troy. In your head, resist the urge to say, oh, PJ. Please don't do that. I mean, I have an amazing life and I get to live out an amazing call that God has placed on my life. I'm not here for you to feel bad for me. The series is called Reset. I believe God is calling me personally to reset. And that's what today is about. It's about a reset for me personally. Next week is about a calling for you as individuals to reset. I'm going to reset today. Next week is about you as individuals resetting. And I want you to know that it's going to probably be challenging. But I really encourage you to be here. And then the third week is going to be calling us to reset as a church. Because I think in some ways we've lost our way. And that's what the 3 weeks are going to be out. Today is about resetting the pastor, resetting the people, and then resetting the church. Today is going to be hard for me because I'm going to have to bear my innermost thoughts to you. See, it's easy for me to say I was going to give someone a lecture and then it was really my phone because, that's funny and you like it when I look stupid. But today's about resetting the pastor. I think in some ways I've lost my way. Not to sin and not on purpose, but I've lost my way. It wasn't a choice that I made, really. It wasn't just one morning I woke up and said, I'm going to do this and not this. It was just like I said it happens. It's just this slow, one small decision after another. And I never really wanted it to happen. It just happened. And the truth is, it happened from a good place. From an honest place. Sometimes we just get distracted. And you can even get distracted by things that are good. And they can distract you. So if you're single and you don't want to be single, you can get distracted by becoming unsingle. It's not that it's a bad thing, it's just a distraction. You can have a health problem and you can get distracted. You can have children, and children are a good thing, but they can distract you from the call that God has put on your life. It's been an honest place, but we just get distracted. And for me, it was a good thing, I thought. And we started thinking, when we start to get distracted and we need a reset, we start thinking. It's not a conscious choice, but slowly we start thinking, I can do this by myself. We've all done it. So don't you look all judgy at me. But we think, I can do this by myself. I want you to know that pastoring is really hard. It doesn't matter if you're a lead pastor, a youth pastor, a kids pastor, an administrative pastor, whatever the role is, it's very hard. And for me, the hard things are this. It's hard for me to know that every single week, there's probably someone that's mad at me. That's really hard. And they show it in different ways. They leave, they do this, they tell me they're mad at me. Tell me lots of things. It's tough to lead people to what you believe is best, knowing they are not listening to you. That's hard. To do it every day. And people come for advice, you give them advice, you pray with them, and then they don't do it. It's tough to pour out your life to have people just turn their back on you because they just are tired of you. It's tough to continually be pushing change because you know that the church needs to change. It's tough to put so much work into a Sunday to make it as an experience that people can experience the presence of God, for people just to make the decision to stay home because they feel like it. I mean, they're not sick, they're not anything, they just have dishes. It's tough to manage finances. It's not the finances because the budget is huge. But it's stressful because when you talk about money, people look at you and they say, well, there's something in it for you. There's nothing in it for me. It's tough because I can't speak for every pastor, but for me, I take things very personal. Whether that's people don't give, I think they don't give because they don't want to follow me. If people stay home because they need to do the dishes, I internalize that they don't want to follow me. The truth is, I'm tired. I find myself frustrated and I don't like that. I want you to know my heart this morning, I am not angry. But I have figured out how I've lost my way. And I need to share it with you today. Because I need to personally make some changes. I need to reset. Reset the pastor, reset the people, reset the church. Let's pray. Dear God, we give you this day. God, I pray that in the midst of our difficulties, in the midst of our challenges, that we would know that you are with us. God, that we would know your presence above everything else. That we would know that no man, no woman can do enough to save us from our sins. That only you can do that. God, I pray that you would speak deep into my heart, into our heart today. In your name. John chapter 11, the story of Lazarus. Starting at verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus is now sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus. Jesus, the one that you love, is sick. So Jesus loved Lazarus. When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. He loved them. So when he heard he was sick, he stayed for 2 more days. In my imagination, I can start to feel the frustration building. Can you imagine if you called a friend and said, "I really need you right now," and they said, "Okay, I'll be there Thursday." He stayed there for 2 more days, and he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you with rocks, not marijuana." Let's just lighten the mood a little bit. "And yet you're going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see the world's light. It is when a person walks at night they stumble, for they have no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up." So Jesus has been with his disciples, and he tells them, he's fallen asleep, I'm going to go there and wake him up. His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." But Jesus had been speaking of his death. But his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, because they didn't get it the first time. How many have ever been someone who didn't get it the first time? Jesus says, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us go. We may die with him." Verse 17, on their arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus has already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. He had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. And many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." So she's frustrated. "But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered. She doesn't get it. She says, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who comes, who believes in me, will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and he is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and she went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews had quickly been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out. They followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached where Jesus was, they saw him, and she fell at his feet. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came along with her were also weeping, he was deeply moved in the spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Then it says, shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. Then Jesus said, see how he loved him? Then the Jews said, see how he loved him? But some of them said, could not he open the eyes of the blind man, have kept this man from dying? Verse 38. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. He was at the cave with a stone laid across the entrance. So there's cave, big stone. Jesus says, take the stone away. Now I just want to stay there for a second. I want us to understand something very, very important. That Jesus did not need them to move the stone. Just in a few chapters later, he's going to move his own stone. He didn't need them to move the stone. But he says, move the stone. Take the stone away, he said. But the Lord said, Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there was a bad odor. He has been dead for 4 days. Then Jesus said, I did not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God. So they took the stone away. Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you, for you have heard me. I knew that you would always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you have sent me. And when he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. Scholars believe that the reason Jesus called him by his name is that he was so powerful, if he yelled, come out, everybody that was dead in that area would have risen out of the ground. So he called him by name. Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out. His hands and his feet were wrapped in strips of linen and the cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Roll the stone. Lazarus, come out. The last few months I've fought a lot of emotions. And in this story there's so much emotion. It says Jesus wept. And one thing that has brought great comfort to me as I've walked in this room numerous times over the last couple of weeks and just wept that God would do something in my own heart and in our hearts, that I know that he was weeping with me. That as much as I love you, he loves you more than I could ever imagine. I fought all these emotions, frustration, stress, at times even anger. As the last couple of weeks, as I prayed more, as I worshiped more, God began to show me something simple, but he showed me how I lost my way. See, this is hard for me because I've been the pastor here for 5 years. Over 5 years. I've been here for over 10 years. And he brought me back to when I started this journey 5 years ago, and I remember I was scared to death. I was scared to death and I was dependent on him. But slowly I got sidetracked and I lost my way. I don't even know how it happened, but I slowly started to think that if I planned good enough, lives would be changed. If I worked hard enough, people's hearts would be changed. If I sacrificed enough, if I built a service that was so engaging or events that were so amazing, if I just made the music better or ran better programs or spoke better sermons or told funnier stories, that if I did these things, people's lives would be changed. I lost my way. We need to know this morning that it's not about my effort. It's not about your effort. It's not about longer hours or people liking me. I think I got my role confused. I think I slowly started to believe that I could call people out of the grave. I didn't mean it to happen that way. Jesus was deeply moved, it says in verse 38. He came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across. And he said, "Take the stone away." And then Jesus called Lazarus out of the grave. I think I had it backwards. I think I said, "Jesus, you roll the stone, and I'll call people out of the grave." But the truth is, all I can do, all you can do, is roll the stone. Jesus calls people out of the grave. Working hard is good, but the truth is, this is not my church. It's his. If I carry the pressure of calling people out of the grave, I'll always be frustrated. Because people want to be in the grave. It's our sinful nature. You need to know, and I need to know today, that only Jesus calls people out of the grave. We just need to roll the stone. See, this reset is for me. It's a new realization that my efforts are not going to call people out of the grave. That my gifts and my talents are not going to call people out of the grave. That working longer hours will not call people out of the grave. To making sure people like me will not call people out of the grave. To carrying the pressure and the stress alone will not call me out of the grave. To being the hero in people's situations will not call people out of the grave. But let me tell you something this morning. There is only one that calls people from the grave. If you're here and you have sin in your life this morning, I don't mean at work this week you hit your finger with a hammer and you said a swear word. I mean if you have sin, known sin that you are living in, you need to know that the blessings of God will never be on your life. That he is calling you out of the grave. And only he brings life. Going to church does not bring life. If you're here and you're struggling financially, only God can call that out of the grave. If your marriage is in trouble this morning, I can point you in the right direction. I can give you advice. But the giver of life can call your marriage out of the grave. If you're battling addiction this morning, only Jesus can call that out of the grave. if you have unforgiveness in your heart, if you find yourself avoiding people, whether that's here or at work, I want you to know that God is not pleased with you. And He wants to call that out of the grave. If you have bitterness in your heart, if you are living in gossip or living in sexual sin, I can help you, I can support you. But all I can do is roll the stone. We can roll the stone together. If you're struggling with the same thing for many years, I would suggest to you this morning that you've become comfortable in the grave. And Jesus is calling you out of the grave. The Bible tells us that the wages of sin is death. That the price of sin is death. Last week I spent much time just weeping in His presence. And I don't say that because I'm spiritual. I prayed over this room. And my prayer for the last few years is that God would fill this room with people. And the motive was good. But my prayers changed. That God would fill this room with His presence. With His presence. Because only His presence can call you out of the grave. You need to know. My prayer is that I would be filled with His presence. That I would roll the stone. That Jesus would call people out of the grave. See, I've got to refocus. See, this is not about perfection. It's about His presence. Because what I'm doing is tiresome. I'm so frustrated. And I don't want to be frustrated. The truth is, I can't do this anymore. Can't do what I've done for the last 3 years. For 3 more years, I can't. We need His presence more than we need anything. Because only His presence can change people's hearts. Not me. Truth is, I want everybody in this room to find salvation, to experience the living God, to find freedom, to be whole in Christ, to find healing from the past. But all I can do is roll the stone. I can help you roll your stone. You can help me roll mine. But only Jesus calls people out of the grave. We need His presence, and the truth is we can't manufacture. We can't produce His presence. You say, Troy, well, what does this look like? Honestly, I don't know. But I know this. Our gatherings on Sunday morning are going to look vastly different than they've looked. That's all I really know. Because nothing matters besides His presence. I will lead worship myself with 3 chords that I know. Alone. Before we sacrifice His presence. We'll turn off the instruments, the lights, before we compromise His presence. That's all I can tell you. You think, well, what can I do? Well, here's what you can do. If you have a pen or piece of paper, your phone, you can write this down. There's 5 things. If you want to be a person of His presence, you've got to read His Word. You've got to. Here's my advice to you. Even 5 minutes a day. Read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, or the book of Acts. Read about the miraculous things that Jesus has done. Read His Word. Number 2, I challenge every single person in this room for 5 minutes every day to pray out loud. Don't say, God, heal my hip, heal my foot. Call for His presence in your life. Out loud. If you've got to go for a drive by yourself so no one thinks you've lost your mind, out loud. Number 3, find a way to fast and pray. To give up something and replace it with prayer. Number 4, prepare for church on Sunday. Don't come to church dry and worn. Come to church ready. Ready to worship. Number 5, you need to listen to His voice. Kevin said it last week. He said we get so tired and caught up with what does God's voice sound like. Often God's voice sounds just like my own voice. And just use this as an example. Every good and perfect gift comes from God. All the good stuff is from Him. That's His voice speaking to you in different ways. And all of the garbage, that's me. That's you. But everywhere in the Bible where we hear the word worship, you can switch that word worship for the word obey. There is no greater worship than our obedience to God. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do everything above. And I don't know what it will look like, but I will build every service around His presence. And all I'm going to do is roll a stone. See, this is my reset. The Bible says this in Matthew 11 in closing. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And the truth is, I have not been living that. Because the burden that I've been carrying is heavy. I would like you in your own hearts this morning, just as we get ready to close, is remember the day, the season, the time that Jesus called you out of the grave. For me, today is resetting the pastor just to know my role. To roll the stone, but Jesus raises the dead. And I want you to know that getting that backwards is absolutely exhausting. Next week, we're going to talk about resetting the people. I would encourage you to keep reading this story in John chapter 11. We're going to talk about it again next week. But I need you to know today, probably 6 months ago, put this on my phone. It says this. It says, I've seen you move. You move the mountains. And I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way. And I believe that I'll see you do it again. I want to be clear that I'm not saying that God has not done great things over the last 5 years. There's people in this room that God has miraculously called you out of the grave. But we need to reset. We need to reset this morning. Me, personally. Please don't feel pity for me. I feel better today than I have in a long time. Because now we have a course. Next week is about your part. What does this look like for you? Why don't you stand?